Welcome back to the Growing Band Director Podcast. This is episode number 132 called Developing the Instrumental Ensemble Sound. And I'm very blessed to be here with Rachel Maxwell from Traughber Middle School in Oswego, Illinois. Rachel's been there for 29 years. And fun fact, Oswego is about to turn 90 for a school, a band program. And she is the third director in that 90 years. Rachel, I saw a clinic that you did earlier this year. And I just was so happy to be able to meet with you. Thanks for being with us today.
I appreciate the invitation. I love it. Thank you.
How did this presentation come about?
Well, I've been doing a lot of clinics, a lot of in-person clinics. And then with COVID, everybody switched to online. And I think it might have been a state conference or somebody said, they had me on the docket to come and visit. And they said, can you transfer this into an online clinic? And absolutely, of course. And so it actually also helped me just sort of, as I was going through it and organizing my ideas of this, I was like, oh yeah, I need to keep doing more of that myself. So it's been good to revisit it. And I put 2023 because I've had a couple of different versions of it that I've used over the last couple of years since we were in lockdown. And I keep tweaking it and revising it. But I've just been really lucky that, I've had the opportunity to share some of these ideas so that people have a little bit more in their toolbox of like, where do I even start? Because I think that's overwhelming.
And anybody who wants to reach out to you, I'm sure they can find you and should do so. We're going to kind of hit 8 different sections today. I'm just going to kind of give people the preview. We're going to do a section on setup and planning, section on fundamentals, section on characteristic tone, a section on embouchure for woodwind and for brass, a section on directional sound, a section on intonation, a section on balance and blend, and a section on alignment. That's sort of where we're going to hit today.
Yep.
So why don't we start with setup and planning?
Sure. All right, let me switch over here.
For anybody who's listening only, if you go to YouTube, you'll be able to see the slide deck on this one as well.
Yeah. So setup and planning, I think, is so critical because particularly when directors come out of school, they've got some pedagogical chops and they've got some philosophical things, but you need to really get your mindset around what it is you want to do. And so setup and planning is so critical because, I've talked to people who want a really good sound or want particular things in their program, but that is only determined by your own vision and your own standard. So you have to kind of get in your head, what is it that I want my band to sound like? For years, I didn't quite get the band where I wanted it because in my brain, I had the wind ensemble that I went to school, undergrad wind ensemble sound in my brain, but I had like a 1980s Bijan band in front of me with 100 and some kids for grade levels. So as soon as I realized I'll never match these two things. I have to shift what I think is the ideal sound for what I have in front of me and then match it to that I started having just more satisfaction musically. So figure out, what do you want your band to sound like? And do you have to set up the instrumentation? What is it in your brain that you want them to hear? Because you're going to have to compare against that constantly. The other thing I talk to people a lot about, and myself, is we have to make decisions about our priorities and then build into our rehearsal the time and energy to meet those goals. We can't want good tone, good alignment, those things, yet not build that into our rehearsals. And I hear a lot of, I don't have time for that. Well, if you don't have time for that, then you're going to have to decide that it's okay that your band doesn't have a great tone or doesn't have great alignment or sound. Because if we are only chasing notes and chasing music and not building these fundamentals, and even at the advanced stages, now I have a concert next Thursday, so we still do a good warm up every day. We still check our tuning, all that stuff, but we're really digging into running those pieces. So there's continuity. So they're obviously based on where you are in your concert cycle, it's going to change a little bit depending on where you're at. But what is important to you has to be built into your rehearsal. Otherwise, it's never going to happen.
And I just want to mention, for me and my wife, who's our middle school band director and who's fabulous, for us, it's number one is tone, right? So we teach tone every day. Now, yes, we teach rhythm and articulation and balance and all that stuff too, but we don't go a day without teaching tone.
Nothing else matters if your tone is bad. No one wants to listen to that. And I tease the kids and I say, your grandma won't even want to come to that concert if your tone's bad. We want to have a concert where if a stranger walked in, they'd be intrigued and be like, oh, what is this I'm hearing? And enjoy us. And, we don't want our audience to only be the people that are legally obligated to love us,
Hmm.
so and the kids laugh and stuff, but I'm like, but really that's the standard we should hold it to, is something that's enjoyable for our audience and ourselves.
And
And going
thanks.
along with that is we have to measure our own grit and persistence. That's one of the shockers for my student teachers. And when I get a new associate director who's partnering with me, is that it's not enough to repeat it or have the kids play through it 2 or 3 times. We're going to go through that little chunk 10 times until it's really polished, until it's really the way we want it. And you just got to kind of dig in, because they're going to roll their eyes and they're going to go, and all the, the band kid things. But if you don't have the grit and persistence to pursue the level that you want your ensemble to perform at, then you need to adjust your expectations of what they'll do. They're not going to exceed us in um, our expectation, our own musicianship, our own persistence. So wherever that bar is, that for yourself, you have to come to terms with that and be realistic with that.
And one of the things to think about is that you have to listen to them every day. So be selfish. Make it music that you want to listen to, because like, you hear some bands and you're like, okay, it might not sound great to listen to that band, but imagine rehearsing them
Right?
every day and letting that sound happen. Like I don't like how do you have a quality of life if you're listening to that? I mean, that's
Oh,
like against OSHA regulations or something. I mean,
100%, and mental health, standards, because,
yeah.
people will kind of who don't really know me or anything about band in general will find out I'm a middle school band director, and they kind of make a face like, "Oh, bless you." And I'm like, "Well, yeah, there are things that I do need your prayers for, but um they can play beautifully. They can play in tune. They can do these things. You just have to decide it's going to happen, and then
Hmm.
have 1,000 ways to get there, because every kid's going to interpret what you're doing differently. And this is kind of off the subject, but particularly now, I mean, kids have a lot of needs and parents have a lot of expectation for us to meet those needs, particularly after COVID. And so we've had to become very creative and very flexible in, all right, we know what our goal is. How many different ways can we get there, and make sure that kids are pushed appropriately?
Hmm.
So that's part of it too, is, we don't want it to be a nasty situation for anybody or tyrannical. It should be a collegial relationship with the kids. But let me dive into some nitty gritty. We can keep talking about
Yeah.
the philosophical stuff all day, of course. But the number one thing is, all right, and I do lots of clinics and lots of honor bands, and we are never going to get those kids to sound good unless we do these fundamental issues. You have to have chairs that your kids can sit at the front edge of. There's no like sitting in that little scoop seat with their booty back. Music stands have to be raised to a level where when a student is sitting and holding their horn properly, the music stand comes up to them. So a lot of times our stands are really quite high in our room, because I want the kids, their chins to be level. I want their upper body tall, so that, I told the kids a music stand is a tool for you. You don't adapt your body to the shape of the music stand. And that's kind of the shock. That's a huge shocker for kids when I will go and do like a guest directing thing at like an honor band. I make them all raise those stands up, and their bodies have never sat in that position when they're playing their instrument. So that's huge.
Yeah.
Get some space between the kids so they can hear themselves. When we have our classes, if we have the ability to, we put an empty chair between every kid, and I like that, so I can go in and plop down next to them and
Hmm.
sit in with the group, or just sit and see how things are from their perspective. But kids need that space. The Chicago Symphony Orchestra French horns determined like 3.5 feet is the ideal space to be able to hear your neighbor and yourself. We don't have 3.5 feet between the kids, but spread them out a little. They shouldn't be squished. And then thoughtful experimental seating charts. There's no rules on where things have to be. None. We've done experiments where I put the kids kind of in a circle or a square facing each other so they can hear each other. It's really raises their awareness. Put your bari sax in between your two tuba players. 99% of the time, they're playing the same thing. Put your tenors and your baritones mixed in together. Put your horns and your altos together. Put your bass clarinets next to your bassoon, and figure out what works for you. The lows don't always have to be in the middle. They can be off to the side so they can be heard better. Just experiment. And how your band was set up in college with, say like the saxophone family together makes no sense for junior high, high school bands until you get to the very highest levels of literature. Really, it makes no sense. So just
Totally.
don't be worried. Like nothing has to be anywhere. If I see some weird seating, I always, if say I'm judging somewhere or whatever, I'll ask the director, what's behind the seating? Talk to me about this. Sometimes they have really good reasons and sometimes they have no reasons. So think about what voices you want, being
Yeah.
collaborative.
Just a
When we do the
just a
seating,
practical thing really
yeah,
quick.
jump in.
I do have if you have like a row that is far too loud all the time and then a row that is far too soft, just swap them. Like if your second row is too soft and your first row is too loud, doesn't matter who's playing first or second, just swap the rows. And it's like
Yeah.
I did that with a band once and it's like, "Oh, that fixed a lot of problems right there."
Even with our beginners, lots of times we'll put our clarinets like in the front 2 rows and our flutes in the third row so that they, we start our kids in 6th grade. And as the flutes become more comfortable and start controlling their aperture and their embouchure more and start controlling their pitch, and we start moving them more forward, but that allows them the freedom to kind of use their air and do things without being overbearing. So a lot of times people will be like, why are the flutes in the third row? Or why is your oboe in someplace weird? Well, until they develop control and feel like that confidence, then we'll move them up to an exposed seat. So that's exactly right. Something I've done recently too is I had like 4 French horns somewhere and 7 altos, and I sat them every other seat because their parts were exactly the same for the music at the band I was doing. And at first they were all kind of weirded out, but I kept saying the saxophones are providing the structure, like the skeleton of the notes and the accuracy. Horns, I want you to fill in and color in their sound, warm it up, but you'll get your pitch from them. And then saxes, you have to match the French horns volume wise. And it started just creating a nice balance. So don't be afraid to try things. I would encourage people with that. Then moving on, let's talk about fundamentals a little bit. Let's see. Number 1, posture. It's the easiest thing to fix. It's like free money. Yet I see a lot of directors not insisting that their kids sit correctly. And, I talk to the kids a lot about sports analogies too, that we're not letting you do things wrong as you're learning how to pitch until you get drafted. You have to do it right from when you start little league all the way through. You have to step with the alternate leg. You throw a particular way. There's follow through. Your body's held. They don't just let you like flip the ball out. And well, if you figure it out on your own, I guess you'll make it to high school, the high school team. So we have to do it correctly and insist that it be correct every single time they play. So those kids have to have their bottom scooched to the front of the chair. They have to keep those feet flat. Now, there's research out there about different ways to like tuck the feet and angle so that there's more air lung capacity for like maybe the bigger instruments and like the breathing gym, thing has ideas about that. But for consistency, I tell the kids keep their weight in the ball of their feet and their toes. So they're sitting forward so they can like stand up immediately. They need to sit in a position that there's no restriction physically. If I see somebody like leaning over to play their saxophone, their elbows wedged in, that's creating tension somewhere in their body. That's getting in the way of airstream. So talk to kids about vertical, and you'll hear kids in the background. This is a real live operating band
There you
program
go.
behind me
There you
happening here.
go.
This is out in the wild. So anyway, vertical and symmetrical, and then open up so that no single body part is touching any other body part. Like we're not supposed to be having our elbows clipped. Oh, they
Yeah.
might announce things,
That's
but
okay.
then people know we're real.
And for teachers who maybe don't do this as much, I heard a quote once that said, "You give approval for everything that happens in your room." So whatever it is, if it's happening
Yep.
and you don't say something, you're implicitly saying that's okay. So if you
Yeah, that's
see,
fine.
it's just
Yep.
whatever you insist on.
Whatever you accept is what they're going to do.
Yep.
So our kids know better. Like I just look at them and I give them the eye and they fix their posture, or I just kind of give them a look and they'll fix it. And eventually they become comfortable with that because their body's balanced. So I don't think I've done very few guest things or, working with other groups where everyone is really paying attention to, every student is paying attention to that. So it can always be readdressed no matter how good your band is. And you can package it in a lot of ways. It doesn't have to be like, we're going to have good posture. It can be, I want to increase your lung capacity. I want to increase the balance of your muscles. I talk to kids about a lot about, let's eliminate tension. And then they're much more likely to go along and be like, oh, let's buy into that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So let me talk about what else. So posture, specifically, I like feet flat, weight on the balls of the feet, knees bent, like angles, shoulders as soft as possible. I do talk to the kids a lot about no tension, no tension, no tension, soft, 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 chin level. And here's a little trick, especially if you have young kids, make them stick their belly button out in front of them. I tell them, I want your belly button to be the furthest point forward in your body. And that all of a sudden opens up everything.
Mm.
And then if their armpits are open, like I should be able to stick a tennis ball in there. And I tell them, not that I want to be like messing with your armpit, but if I did and wanted to stick a tennis ball in there, it would work out great. Plus, air it out. You don't want to stink in your next class. But that belly button forward is a game changer because that opens up all this, and it really works. And my littles, like we just tell them that from the minute they walk in the door, and so they buy into it because that's all they know of. How, and we call it, your normal life sitting position versus your playing an instrument position, and they should be very different things.
Right.
And breathing. Now, lots of people have ideas about, breathing gym or exercises or using tubes. And I've done a lot of those things, but my biggest concern is that we keep it tension free and that we do all our exercises in a relaxed and focused state. One of the things that Alex Kaminsky worked with my group on is having kids, exhale the stale air in 2, suck in really the fresh air for 2. And when I find my kids, like I'm trying to get them to do that all of the time, it doesn't always work with what we're doing musically, but I want them to understand like that fullness and what that feels like, but do it as relaxed as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you have people have tricks or things that they want to do or particular exercises, I'm a fan of all of them as long as there's no tension. It's one of the reasons why I don't do like long note contests, because by the end of that long note, some kids like, trying to get that note out. And that's the opposite. I don't want anybody doing that ever. So just be like, think about what's the end goal of this breathing. And then how do I get there without building in weird habits or weird things that I normally wouldn't want my kids to do when they're playing their instrument, I think is the biggest takeaway.
Yeah. And so many times when you're in a rehearsal, say you're not even doing a breathing section, but you want to just, you want to like calm down the tension in the room. You can do throw breathing exercises in between pieces and it brings them right down. And then you can also talk about when you go to start, especially on a ballad and they're all over the place. Well, it's the breath that's the problem, right? So get them to breathe correctly and together get that entrance correct, and the breath fixes the music.
100%. Just yesterday, I was with my 8th grade brass, and they were kind of having sloppy entrances on this. They'd have like several beats of rest, play for a short little thing, beats of rest, play. And so then I just went over it, and as we're running through it, and I'm still conducting, but I walk over to them, and I was like, keep going, everybody. And I started doing really deliberate breaths where I wanted them to, and then they just instinctively start doing it with me. I didn't even have to talk about it to them.
Yep.
I just showed them breathing out, and it just started lining up, and I gave them like a see, and they're all like, yep, we got it.
A standard rule that I know a lot of people use is breathe 1 beat before you enter within the style of the music. And then that works for a lot of people.
It does work really well. And it, like you said, and if there's something where we have some relaxed time, I do like to get the kids to stretch that to 2 counts. Yep. It's very Texas, but it works, and, but I do like in the style, because then they like nail it on the way in.
Like if you have a staccato entrance, if you breathe staccato, that helps you with the style. Yeah,
you're right. Exactly. Kick it off. And obviously, please, please, please make sure your kids are breathing through their mouth only. Keep the body soft, no shoulder motion. I tell the kids too, I like to see an open mouth. I should see the sides of their mouths open, like a full breath, unless they're doing like where they're pulling air in. So, experiment with that, but you'll be surprised. There are kids sneaking air in through their nose. Mm-hmm. And, when I have my little kids, like my 6th graders, I say, if you breathe through your nose, you're going to get boogers in your mouthpiece. And they look at me all weird. I'm like, well, don't do it then.
You can tell you're an experienced middle school teacher.
Oh yeah. I'm not afraid to say anything weird. Like the weirder, the better. And they it's almost like, even if they don't think it's funny, if I get a little bit of shock value, they remember it.
Absolutely.
All right, let's see what else I got here. Oh, so more breathing. Obviously breathe silently, like when we're doing experiments there, you can do like the, that suction sound and all that. But when we're actually breathing, we shouldn't be rasping or anything. I also want kids to be comfortable with As soon as they're in, the air goes right back out. We're not
Mm-hmm.
like stacking air, which as a French horn player, it's something I tend to do. If I have a second or two playing, I know I like suck in extra air, so I'm stacked for the next phrase. But it's not a great habit for younger players to get into. That air exchange, super smooth. I do talk to my kids about like cold air in, get that air sucked in, and warm air out.
Yeah.
And then we do a lot of targeted breathing. Like even my French horn players, I'll mention that. Okay, when they're playing with that left hand up, I will say to my kids, if I need them to like spin that air more, I'll say, picture this spot on your finger is on fire and you have to blow it out while you're playing this note. That gets them just to like direct the airstream. Or I'll tell my kids, aim at this spot on the wall or aim at Mrs. Maxwell. If you
Mm-hmm.
are annoyed with me today, this is your chance, kind of thing. But targeted breathing is really helpful for kids. I just find so many things we're talking about are pretty abstract for them. And so we need to turn it into concrete,
Yeah.
physical, measurable ideas.
Yeah, you make it tangible. One thing you said here is the cold air in and warm air out because, the reason that works is cold air in means they're getting a lot of air right away. And then warm air out, obviously they want a warm sound as they're playing. So that's just that imagery helps right away get a lot of air in and then use the air correctly.
And particularly for brass players, that warm air out, I think, encourages a more open embouchure and those teeth
Yep.
apart because they're not going to hiss it out. Um, and I will talk about this more, but I do talk about tongue, voicing with the woodwinds and the brass extensively. Even our little beginners like understand what to do with that. So I never want to confuse warm or cold air with like where we're placing our tongue inside the
Mhm.
mouth too.
Yep.
Just so if anybody's wondering about that. Let's see what I have here next. The green screen of death. All right, let me see what's happening. Yeah. Okay, so one thing I do to my kids, and you had talked about it doing breathing exercises, is I will put up a box breathing on the screen. And you can find that on YouTube where they breathe in for 4 through their nose, hold, breathe out through their mouth, hold, and there's lots and lots and lots of them. We'll find one that's like a 5-minute one or something and calm music. I don't ever want like some creepy coach on it or whatever. So we'll find that. And I have it built into my daily slides so that if things are really wound up or people aren't being intentional or it's 6th grade brass class and there's 70 of them and they're mostly boys and they just came from lunch. We turn off the lights, we put that on. We just start with box breathing and then we can turn that into band breathing as
Hmm.
they focus, calm down, that sort of thing. So I have a video for that, but if you look, there's lots and lots of breathing. And I told his kids, this is the breathing that Navy SEALs use when they want to focus for their missions. And if it's good enough for the Navy SEALs, I think it can handle some Randall standards. So it works for us. All right. So, okay. Number 2, after they're seated, they're breathing and relaxed, playing position. Make your kids hold their horns in a standard way. Sometimes I look at kids and it feels like their director just handed it to them, and however they picked it up, they just ran with it. There is a correct way to hold instruments, and I think we need to insist on that from the minute the kids start. Because, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to bump that, but that's fine. We'll keep going. Hold those instruments the right way. Now, some people say like hamburger hands, but I like 2 C's. Almost every instrument can start this way. Like all my cornets, I put literally a piece of tape, like little painter's tape on their lead pipe, and that's where their thumb rests and then their fingertips. One hand holds the instrument and the other one is only fingertips on the instrument, playing bouncing valves. Literally, I tell them your right hand only bounces the valves. That's all it should do. Same thing with the baritone. That right hand should just be bouncing on those valves. It shouldn't be clutching. There's no need for that. It creates a lot of bad habits. Woodwind, same thing. Our flutes, we do use thumb ports on our right hands under the flute, so they're positioned right. Clarinet, same thing. Like we start that and then we go to more of like a hamburger hand. But this like sort of clutching of brass instruments that I see in some like holding saxophones to the side, you should be like armpits open, sitting up, hold the instrument. And most of the like method books, especially the beginner ones, have a picture of a kid in there holding their instrument, and they're usually spot on. They're usually
Yeah.
pretty good. Um, and I just, I say to my kids all the time, when you get a paycheck playing your instrument, you hold it however you want. Until then, you have to do it my way. So, and I will love you in a lot of ways, but I will not love weird hand positions. So you have to hold it the right way.
It also looks, when you see a band of kids with bad posture, it also looks like they're not trying. Whether they are
Well,
trying or not, it gives that appearance of I'm not even putting an effort here.
right. And I think about, how hard it is to play correctly. If you're slumped in your seat, you're like, okay, I'll take trumpet, for example. Your hands are all entangled in those valves and just sort of like clutching it. This is a lot harder than this, and and I'll have them do little tricks like that. Like, guys, do your fingers like this. Now do it like this. One's easier. Let's do the easy one because that's how your body is built. There's ways to play these instruments where it works for our bodies. And then long term, we build better habits, stamina. We can play longer. We can play comfortably. We can play correctly. So that's pretty important. And unless a child has a specific need of support for why they wouldn't, which you would adapt, there's literally no reason for anybody to not hold their horn the same way a professional musician, demonstrating it the correct way would. I just don't. Yeah. Let's talk about characteristic tone now, because that gets more into the band sound. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, we haven't even talked about band sound yet, all of these things lead to the band sound. They're the building blocks, because no one, you, me, no one, we cannot make our band sound good unless they play the instruments correctly. There's no cheating, there's no workaround, there's no hiding. So pedagogy has to be in place.
Yep.
I just want to shout that out.
Agreed.
All right. So for characteristic tone, modeling. I can't say that enough. Live or recording is critical. And okay, so I am a trash flute player. I know that. I can diagnose and fix things. I cannot play the flute for anything. I get a nice head joint sound, and that is the end of it. All right. So for whatever reason, it's just not my thing. When I teach a flute class, I'm not demonstrating on flute. I might demonstrate on a different instrument where I can sound beautiful. And then once the kids start getting stronger, I have them model quite a bit. There's some research out there that, like real research, not I Googled it research, that shows that if a teacher models for students, they will pick up on it and be more likely to try it. But if a student does it, it almost doubles the effect. So like if you're in a class and you have, one other kid play it and they're great, your stronger players will then also want to demonstrate and play. And then if you let somebody who maybe is developing and encourage the things they're doing as they're developing, like, wow, I heard you really get your air focused, that you're improving where you're placing your tongue, that then the kids that might not have arrived yet at, tone quality Disneyland are more encouraged to go out on a limb and try it because their peers are doing fine and they weren't, decimated by trying it. So get yourself modeling it and then pass it off to the kids that can handle modeling. But we have, my co-teacher and I have all our instruments set up, and we grab an instrument every single class and model tone, style, whatever it is particular we want to look at. But tone has to be modeled because they don't know what they're supposed to sound like.
Nope.
They have no idea. So I always play on what I sound the most beautiful on. So I play a lot of cornet and French horn. I'm a decent clarinet player, so I'll do that too. But then I leave the woodwind stuff to my co-director. And if I need a good model, I'll ask him to do it for me of a woodwind sound. Another thing for tone quality, and this is a bigger deal in some parts of the country than others, but a harmony director is worth every single penny of the investment. We use it for providing a drone for our warm-ups. I also play it as a unison during warm-ups, and I go slow enough that kids can hear it and match. We got it on a big speaker too. Then we also use it for when we isolate. So say I want to hear somebody play a melodic line or any line, trombone 2, let me hear those 4 measures. I will play along with them on the harmony director. So it's doing a couple of things. It's providing a stable pitch. It's providing a tone that's consistent, even though it's not necessarily like a trombone tone, that consistency. And also, if you set it to the pure temperament, you're going to build in where kids might be pushing or pulling down pitches as they move through the instrument. You're going to help them really simply just hear that they're clashing, and then they work to match that. You don't even have to explain it to your super young kids. Just match this. They can understand that. And even if they hum along to what we play on the harmony director, or buzz along to it, and we lots of times too, I'll have let's have the trombones play along with this. Trumpets, I want you to be my judge and hear how close are they matching. Do you hear any notes that don't match what I'm playing? And they can find that really fast. Okay, then we talk about, well, why isn't it matching? What's going on? And we go onto it from there. But that has probably changed my band sound the most, and got in just the core sound, excuse me, and the tuning and the stability so much better.
And the price of it is, half of an instrument, or less, depending
Right.
on what instrument.
Yeah. And like Michael put out this easy warm-up book. There's nothing in there that almost every band can't play. It's just simple exercises. He also has videos, which it's not pulling up right now because of the internet, but he has several YouTube videos. If you look at Michael Pote, harmony director, where he walks you through how to use every step of it. And then experiment. It's not just for tuning chords. We use it horizontally way more than, like, we do isolate chords and match and hear and pull things and push things. And even with our beginners, we do that. But we use it horizontally, I would say, more so they understand how to make a melodic line play in tune with itself first, and then go from there. So it's worth it. So investigate. It's not a scam. I don't think it's like a fly by night kind of thing. I think it's here to stay, and it's opened up my ears and made me even much more aware of intonation things that I thought I had done pretty good. But ever since I started working with this, I'm like, oh, my ears weren't that great, but they're getting better.
Yeah, I kind of liken it to, we use a metronome for time. This is a metronome for pitch. It's just a mechanical way for us to be more accurate.
100%. And it's amazing how much of it can go unspoken, because you have a musical example, an oral example. Then kids have this concrete, again, thing that, listen to what, match to what. Well, here's something they can match to. The other thing we use extensively for our warm-ups is John McAllister's material is fantastic, because it provides the metronome, the drone, and there are dozens of levels of warm-ups. I even found ones where I Googled, Remington exercise, and I found an exercise of his that isn't even on his website. So he has so much out there. And if you use his stuff, there's like a donation page. You can throw, $10 in to help him keep doing it. But his warm-ups, I think, are outstanding. They include a chorale. And here's what I like. We put the warm-up on, and then I can walk around the room during this warm-up sequence and answer questions, fix things, straighten a stand, fix an instrument, get that kid who always is the last one ready, get him ready. I can tell kids, like, oh, start adjusting that pitch. Can you hear you're really sharp on that, or you're really out on that, or match that. And it's a whole page of warm-ups. So it goes through, long tones, slurring, then there's like articulation things, chorale. So you can have a complete and very thorough warm-up sequence. But you click the start key on the YouTube video, and then we walk around and problem solve, and get the class going that way. It's pretty efficient, and it's a good product.
I'm going to put in a little plug real quick. On episode number 56 and 57, I interviewed a two-part interview with John, and on there he talked about, so people can go back and listen to it anytime they want. It's on YouTube and on podcast platforms. But he talks about his whole mission is to make fundamentals something that kids like to do, that they'll go home and do. So that's his whole mission.
Yeah, and they're wonderful. Like he'll have like the normal drone, background, and then he'll have the cinematic one where it sounds like movie music. And he does different seasonal, backgrounds. And we usually use just the straight ahead ones, but we'll say to the kids, if it's, Halloween that day, let's use the spooky one. And they get a kick out of that. So, but it doesn't take away in any way from the quality of what they're doing. Sometimes when we do goofy things or play a tune that's, lighter selection, it's not really adding to what they're learning. Where in this case, I think his quality of the product is always so consistent.
Yeah, it just makes it more fun.
Yep, absolutely. All right. let's talk about embouchure. So during COVID, this was horrible because we didn't have kids in front of us. And then when kids finally came, we had last year's 8th grade start. Oh, in the background, I don't know if you can hear that, but that's our 6th grade beginners learning how to do pop-up notes over the break. That's a delight. So if you hear screaming cats, it's our beginners doing their first pop-ups. But I told the kids, they came in, they started online. Then in 7th grade, they still had to wear masks and play. We had musician masks. And then last year's 8th graders, they finally could play without masks. And I said, I felt like I got catfished because I thought everything was going well. And then they took off these masks and I had these crazy embouchures. And to undo and fix an embouchure is almost impossible.
Yeah.
It is, the muscle memory is so intense and it creates such discomfort for kids and anxiety that you have to start them right and you have to fix it before it gets ingrained. It's like the cookie is still baking when they're in that first year. It's still soft enough to shape it, but once that's set,
Yeah. That's really hard.
it is really hard. Think about how many people have stories about going to college and their college teacher wanted them to do an embouchure change. And these are sophisticated musicians who want to do well, want to change, and how hard it is. So as you're going, trust no one, check constantly for inconsistencies, abnormalities, something poofing out weird. We use mirrors, little locker mirrors, a lot with the kids. I will assign them to check their embouchure in a mirror at home, like they are supposed to practice in front of a mirror when they do check things. I'll take them to, I'll just be like, all right, you two go in the girls' bathroom together and look at your embouchures and, like look in the mirror in there. Go tell me what and then come back when your cheeks aren't puffing, kind of thing. But you got to get a mirror in front of them. You have to be on them all the time about that embouchure. So let me see. So woodwinds, there's some universal things. There's obviously, this isn't necessarily like the pedagogy of clarinet or anything like that, but if their embouchure is correct, it's efficient and clean looking. There's no extra puffs. There's no weird like muscle straining. You won't see like a vein exposed. It's just clean, efficient. It's symmetrical usually. Now, some kids have, musculature is a little bit different. That's fine. But also, if you go to like, say, when we were online, I went to Teachers Pay Teachers and found a ton of embouchure examples, really nice pictures and videos of close-ups of embouchures. We show those to the kids still. So get them to use your mirror. Show them your embouchure. Make yours look like mine. Look in the mirror. Does it look like yours? Put them as partners. We do tons of partner work. Check your partner's embouchure. Does it look like it's supposed to? Tell them what you see. Brass embouchure. I think the biggest thing on them that I see that's a problem with brass embouchure is both lips are not buzzing. So when I pull people's mouthpieces off and I say, buzz your lips, a lot of kids can't. They've never had to do that. So we do teach our beginners. We start with like a baby lips, we call it, and then we move to a, and I really insist that both lips have to be buzzing outward. They have to be actively buzzing and teeth apart. If somebody's playing with a really bad tone, a lot of times that bottom lip is sucked underneath the top lip and it's not doing anything. So check that right away. We also talk to them extensively about teeth apart in the brass family, and saxophones should do this a bit too because they need to be really soft in that jaw. But we'll have the kids take their finger. Can you push it between your teeth? Now play a note. If you can't push it between your teeth, your embouchure is too closed. And that right away fixes a lot of things. We do the trick where, they flip the mouthpiece over, slide it in to feel the shank, slide it out. That's your teeth space. Those things work at just getting their open up at the molars kind of thing.
I do want to mention really quick what you had with the lips going and buzzing out is really important, but there's a fine line between that and like sticking your lips out and buzzing. And you find a lot of kids like kiss the mouthpiece so they can't get a good buzz. So our lips should be flat against our teeth while also buzzing outward.
Exactly. And I say to them, sit with your face the way you would just be sitting in class normally. You're not like sitting around like doing kissy lips at people. And if you are, then we have to talk about that issue. But it just neutral lips. And I feel like if I have them put two fingers on their chin, it helps them not get it too poofy. It just kind of helps them stabilize. And then, the saying that ew, and then that buzz. And by demonstrating a lot and putting the mirror in front of them, it really avoids the kissy face. So that's a good point too. But with all of them, the other thing too is nothing should be moving when they're playing or articulating. Sometimes I'll see kids like, you can start seeing their jaw and their throat move. We will ask the kids to take one hand and put it actually on their neck when they start articulating to make sure that they can't feel any motion. And as soon as they do start feeling things motion, okay, we stop, then we readjust, address what's their embouchure, what's the tongue doing, etc. But that's a really quick way for kids to understand when I say you're moving your throat and they're like, I'm not. I'm like, well, put your hand there, kid. And they go, oh, I am. And they're much more inspired than to adapt it and fix it if they understand that they're actually doing it. They're not a throat tonguing denier or whatever you want to call it.
It's also much harder to do, to use your throat.
Oh, so much harder. Again, talk to the kids, like the corners have to remain still and firm when the tongue moves. And I tell my kids I want them to be their embouchure set 4 counts before they play on their face. And I want to keep it set after 2 to 4 counts before it should be set. So they're just releasing the tongue and the air is going. Then I also want them to keep that embouchure set after the release, because on a release, you'll find the kids, when they let go of the note, they also let go of their muscles. They relax. And I want them to keep that embouchure set all the way through, and just the air is stopping, and then they can relax the muscles once we get into the rest.
That's funny, because that's something that as a professional you would do. You finish the note and then you would release your embouchure, and all you're doing is telling them to do what we would already do. To be honest, in all my years of teaching, I've never heard that, and I like that.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Because if you listen to like more immature bands, they kind of like they fall off the cliff at the end of the release. The release is never a good, like an active, like floated release. And part of it is because they are letting everything go instead of just dropping their air.
Yeah.
So, and even we talked about even our 6th graders, our beginners, they know that the only thing that stops at the end is they just stop blowing, that everything has to be held up still. We do buzzing. Now, I happen to have my brass kids. Our numbers are big enough that even for 7th and 8th grade, I have a 7th grade brass class and a 7th grade woodwind percussion class, 8th grade brass class, 8th grade woodwind percussion. Then all my beginners are divvied up. So we do a lot of buzzing with the brass, but as your brass are buzzing, your woodwinds can be doing long tones. And like if you use those McAllister warm-ups with your full group, there's all of those first few lines, the brass can be buzzing all of that while your woodwinds are playing it. And then if you're doing it with a harmony director with them, which I do, it really adds a lot of stability. So it's not as boring for the kids just to buzz. They have something going on around them in a background, and then it's a little more fun then for them.
And I think the teachers who are out there listening who are brass players completely understand the buzzing. But if you're a woodwind player or a percussionist, the reason we like to buzz is because it's the instrument is a crutch that helps set you on at least close to the right pitch. But if you can buzz the note with just the mouthpiece, you're going to be far more in tune with a better sound when you put the mouthpiece on your instrument.
100%. And then moving into lip slurs, they're beneficial for brass and woodwinds, because woodwinds have to like move that air straight across, and then that fluidity of their fingers, how many times do they hitch on a slur? So for brass and woodwinds, flexibility, seamless connection between your notes, so that one note goes right into the next one, are the goals. So don't negate any kind of slurring exercises or Remingtons and stuff for your woodwinds either. That has been really beneficial to getting our woodwind sound really robust, is that they blow through those slurs and those patterns, and there's not bumps in the road per se.
Yeah, and the lip slurs for brass players just are weightlifting. It just builds the muscle.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. Again, developing the consistent, unwavering, a straight line sound. I use all sorts of metaphors with them of, the bricks in our wall are examples of when you tongue and then the sound starts, follows through and ends all the same way. I saw on Facebook or something, I think it was Michael Putt's page. In fact, it said a good musician, they start the notes together. Better musicians start and play together. Great musicians start, play together, and end exactly the same way together. So there's 3 parts to that note that we have to be really concerned about. And so when we're doing lip slurs, we don't want anything falling off at the end. We want it to push all the way through. And we start everything really pretty slow. I'm doing a lot of my warm-ups at about between 70 and 80. And we do that quite a bit so that they can really focus on what's happening physically and not chasing anything or trying to keep up or anything, even with the older kids. But as they get faster, that quality and accuracy, you can only go as fast as they can play it pretty much perfectly. And however fast it is how fast it is. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's fast, if it's sloppy and gross. That doesn't do any good. So
yeah, and lip slurs should be center of the pitch to the center of the pitch. It shouldn't bend flat and then go sharp and then go. It should be right pitch to pitch in tune. So
that's a great point. I'm picturing like the notes like scooping into the next one.
Going down for sure. You can go beer all pops off. So you want it to be center of center.
And not to be like, a harmony director fangirl, but that's another way, because you're going from one note right to the center of the next one. And so it's helping kids hear, like, what does the middle of a note sound like? Like, where is that target? So, and again, no kids are too little or too young to be doing these things if you're setting them up with good posture and position and everything's been started correctly. Directional sound, what we just talked about, sustained notes have to be a straight line sound, definitely, start in the middle range of the instrument. And then as they get better at having that really consistent tone all the way through, then the range that they can do that is going to expand. But don't expect it to happen on some exposed thing in a piece of music. Like trumpets, you have that high F. Why does it sound like it's all over the place? Well, because their G's in the staff aren't steady yet. So you can't expect anything to happen in your music that hasn't been addressed in your fundamentals and your warm-ups and your exercises and mastered there. It's not going to happen it's not going to miraculously. Music isn't necessarily like, you can teach concepts in your music, but those concepts should all be isolated and taught in your warm-up and then put into context in the music. You shouldn't use, my thought is the music isn't the teaching tool. The music is the expression of what's been taught.
100%.
So, all right. Sustaining note, full value with good energy, supporting through the release. Have them visualize. I use laser beams, water fountain. You sound like you just drove off the end of the cliff, or whatever. So whatever kind of visualization you can come up with, use it. And that reminds me, I have a book here. I haven't dug into it too far, but I bought this because I really like visual. It's called literally Visualizing Music by David Kish. And it's an illustrative guide to exceptional rehearsals and performance, Jay. And it has literally like visual diagrams of different musical concepts. Now, how great are these then to throw up on your overhead to show kids of pictures of what, so they can picture the sound in their head. So this,
what's the name of the book again for people who didn't write it down?
Yep. Visualizing Music by David Kish. And it's a GIA publication. And I haven't dug into it too far, but it gives lots and lots of literally picture samples of different sound concepts.
That's great.
Yeah. So it's just another tool, because we have so many kinds of learners that we're much more aware of now, and kids that want to be part of band. Well, let's make it as easy as possible for them to understand it. All right. So the concert F relay, the F around the room, I think is really your go-to. Once you do, just your regular warm-ups, this is going to be the truth teller of your sound of your band. So there's a million ways to divide it up by parts, by voice, by instrument, highs, lows, however you want to divide it. But we assign each group a number, and we go, and I do put on a metronome, and we go, we play a measure or whatever it is, 2 measures in group 1, and it goes right into group 2 and goes right into group 3, no break in between. And I'm trying to get the kids, as we do this relay around the room, to be 100% consistent in the intensity of their sound. So they understand that pretty well. So I'm not talking then about loudness, softness, air. I'm like, match the intensity. And then after we do a round, I'm like, who had the best intensity? Who sounded the best? And they know who sounded the least best. Because I don't necessarily want to say who was the worst, who did not sound great. And they know that too. And I'll say, okay, let's start with making sure all of our air is intense this time. Okay, and it'll get better. And then if we still hear like inconsistent tone or tuning or issues, we can address those really fast. And the kids hear it instantly when you do that side-by-side comparison of each section. And I include the percussion in that too, because I talk to them about no matter what instrument they're on, they have to musically fit into the wind players. They can't just be, Animal from the Muppets back there. There'll be times for that. But are all the mallet instruments playing with the same intensity? Are all the drums playing with the same intensity? All these things apply to them as well. And so I can also make a link to the slide deck available. So if anybody wants to go through just the slide deck later and look at some of these details, if they are watching this, they're welcome to use this, but just different ways. Start with the section that demonstrates the best of what you want to do, and top to lowest, flutes to tuba, however you want to do it. It doesn't matter, but you can just start with F's whole notes around the room. That will tell you a lot, and then move to a concert B flat. And then you could even isolate. We do it like we're going to go up the scale, up the scale, up the scale, up the scale. Whose seventh note sounded like they're not addressing the tuning or the fingering pattern? Yeah, the clarinets, your B natural sounded like trash clarinet. Sorry. The other kids will say to them, well, then they know, oh, I do have to fix that. There's some accountability there as well.
Yeah.
So just do it.
For that link, for the link for the slide deck, I'll put it on the show notes so everybody can access it easily there.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when I do a concert F, I end it with everybody. Now, everybody play together and see if we can fit it together. But we tell every kid they have to fit into the sound of what they already heard, or it has to sound better than what they already heard. There's no backtracking.
Love it.
And like I said, match intensity. And then they have to know that the air is like the end of their note has to be the fuel that kicks off the next section's note. Mm-hmm. Like you're passing a relay race baton. And they get pretty good at that when you start like telling it, there can't be a seam in there. I need to hear it go straight through, just like a musical line would. Then when you get to your musical and you're passing melodic material back and forth or harmonic support back and forth, they understand you need to pass that off to the clarinets, just like when we do the F around the room. And they understand that.
Yeah, you practice the skill and then they can do it.
Yep, 100%. We also check a lot of individuals. We go down the line all the time. And enough that it's not threatening. I don't want this to be a punitive thing. I'm not trying to catch anybody, but I'm trying to understand what's happening inside the band, and I'm trying to get them to understand it and hear it better. So if we do find something that's not great, then it's like, oh, let me help you with that. It's that approach, not I'm going to zing you. I'm going to catch who didn't know their music. No, it's going down the line. And if I find somebody struggling, I'm like, what do you have in your music? Go ahead and write that first a 1 down for that D because you're missing that or whatever, then we can like give supports to that individual kid. And we want them to feel like, oh, when Mrs. Maxwell hears me play down the line, it's not scary. It might be a little scary because I have to play in front of people, but at the same time, it's going to help me get better. And we're going to be able to hear kids too. I could say, who's got the best tone? Let's go down the line real quick. And they'll be like, oh, we like Mackenzie's. You know what? Let's all try to match Mackenzie this time. But we talk about, rewarding the best tone, matching the tone. So we will be like, I want to hear individuals. I want to hear you two. Now you two, now you two, now you three, now you four. Do that a lot. And the kids' ears start getting pretty sophisticated pretty fast with that. All right, here we go. The big one, intonation. You're either, I tell the kids, in tune or things are just bad. You have to be in tune. Now, are there times when we play things out? Of course, because like positions or the instrument's not built to necessarily play in tune in some keys, but we can try. So first thing first, you have to demonstrate and identify to kids what is good intonation and what is bad intonation. So they fully understand the sound between the two. And they understand, oh, good intonation is awesome to listen to and fun to play in, so that it's a goal that they desire, not just this sort of thing that the director's ranting about. And I'll just say this. When I was even in college, and I've told people this, okay, I'm sitting in the top band at my college and good player, pretty experienced musician at that time. And he would say, look at us all. And he'd be like, listen. And I'd be like, playing and matching, and I can't listen anymore. I don't even know what to listen to. And I was in college. I was like, I don't know what to do. But nobody told us, nobody threw us a lifeline to help guide that. It's so abstract, and it depends so much on like the tone and the color of your instrument and who you're matching with. Those things affect how you hear your tuning. And so you have to teach it to kids. Even when they're in high school, they have to be taught what is good, what is bad. That's number one. You have to demonstrate that. We use tuners. All right. And I have had people criticize and say, you got to get those kids off those tuners. They're never going to learn how to use their ear. I'm going to disagree respectfully that tuners do help them develop an ear because it gives them an identification of what they're hearing. So are my kids staring at a tuner every note they play of every song, every period? No, absolutely not. We do it, have it on the stands to the warm up. They have a microphone clipped, but they have to learn when I sound like this, the tuner is telling me, oh, I tend to play flat. And I didn't realize that's what that was, or sharp, or whatever the case may be. But they need someone, the tuner, telling them what their sound is. And so then they can start identifying themselves. Oh, when I sound like that, that means I'm flat, etc. I think it builds a lot of confidence in kids. And then there's times when I can say, can you guys just match that real quick? Here's the F. And they can adjust and tune without their tuners pretty well because they have spent a lot of time comparing what they hear to what they see and what they're told the tuning tendency is.
Yeah,
so
and
that's
even
my
for
rant on that.
even for
And
people who are not, if they don't believe it, like at least using the tuner gives them the visualization and gets them close, so that then they have a concept to then drop the tuner, right? But at
right.
least
And then, right. And as you're playing and you need to match and push and pull things, that's why then I use the harmony director for horizontal lines and I set it to the key that we're in so that it's a pure temperament. So things are adjusted. That's when then we can start developing that horizontal and that chordal ear. So they're not glued to their tuner, but I make them leave it clipped onto their instrument and on their stand, and then we'll turn it off after we're done warming up. But then I like to, like, say we hear something that just isn't working. I'll be like, stop, find 138. Okay, turn your tuners on, everybody. Let's check our notes. And we'll stop and isolate and check. For trombone players, it is like the miracle tool because everyone's fourth position where they're in tune is slightly different. Everyone's fifth is slightly different. There's no universal spot on any trombone or French horn or oboe that's in tune. So the kids need to learn what their own tendencies are with that tuner on there. I have this chart. This is what I put up on my screen when we're teaching them how to use a tuner. And we talk to them about how much is, how much you see versus how much you pull or push. And then I like to slap up the smart music tuner and we go down the line so everyone in the band can see up on the screen. What is she? Oh, sharp. A lot or a little? A lot. Yep. Smart music's verifying that. Adjust. And we go down, up and down the line, particularly with those beginners with it up on the screen. And they all want that green light to come on. But if they don't, we adjust the horn, show them, put your horn here instead. Now try it. And I'm confident enough in their embouchures and their understanding of air and where the tongue is that it is an instrument that needs to change, not necessarily them doing something weird in their face.
And I like how you wrote here, yes, flat to push in, sharp pull out, but the further from the center, the more you need to adjust the instrument. It's like, yeah, of course.
Duh. And we know that, but kids don't understand that for a long time. I've had many experiences where I'm working with, as a guest with kids, and they don't know how to use a tuner. We should teach them because I would have been a lot less stressed out as a French horn player if I had had a tuner in my life sooner. Okay, let's just put it that way. I could have done something with my life. All right, so these are things I like to tune to. All right, everyone has their own opinion, but I have reasons. So on the flutes, we check an E and F just to get them in the ballpark. But then with my older kids, we check at A natural, and that needs to be dead on. And then we check a B flat, and I let that be just slightest bit sharp. Because if we tune that high B flat, everything else tends to be a little bit flat on them. So that's my 2 cents on that. Oboe, we use an E and an A. Clarinets, I like to use an E for the barrel because it's a lot more stable than a G for them. And so I have them play an E, and then we adjust the barrel. Then we do a this is for my 7th and 8th graders. The beginners don't know this, obviously. We do a long B over the break, and then I have them adjust their middle joint and a little bit of their bell so that over the break they're in tune. Altos, we do like a G, F sharp, slur, obviously. Tenors, a C. Trumpets, I've been experimenting, and we've been tuning our trumpets a G, and that's generally a hair on the flat side, because if we get the C in tune, we got to pull out a bit, and then the G is going to be really flat. So we get the G really close, and then I have them slur up to a B natural, and we see where that is. And if those two match, we're good. But I find that the C up in the staff for the trumpets, just if we get that locked in really in the center, everything lower than that tends to sit flat on the horn a bit.
Yeah, that B's a great note. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's just very stable. Horns, we do a G and then a C with a thumb for their trigger side. The trigger side tends to be really sharp, particularly if you're playing like on an 8D or something. And then low brass, we do an F to a B flat, and we just check both of those. And again, this is sometimes people get very defensive about what they want to tune on because they're a specialist on their instrument, and that's great. But I happen to do middle school and kind of younger bands. This gets us in a really good place where the rest of the instrument's pretty consistent then on their notes if we get this close. Okay. Let's go ahead and pause the recording. I'm going to kick everybody out of my hallway.
All right. Now we've removed all of the background talking. Were they mortified when they found out they were on the podcast?
They all went and then ran away. Okay. So singing, lots of people talk to sing. My kids are very reluctant to sing, but they'll hum. And especially with younger kids, if they start humming, then eventually you can trick them into singing. They just hum, oh, and then drop the mouth open and they're singing, and it's not scary. And we actually have our choir director come in and get them. She's very like dynamic and very energetic, and she can get kids to do a lot of things, that they're uncomfortable with. And she talks to them about how to start with that hum and open and oh, and how to use their voices. And I would say we do more humming than singing in our band because I do have younger kids, but they're pretty comfortable. And I can say you can hum quiet to yourself to start. You don't have to be like an opera singer or anything. Just it's fine. But getting them to hum their note as I play the sample on the HD, so they can hear it right where it is, or even humming their line. Then when they go to match it, they've got an internal, like I tell them, okay, it's like karaoke, except the track you're following has to be inside your head. And then they kind of understand. Because if I'm like, you need to audiate that, they're looking at me like, with their mouths hanging open.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And then for tuning baby steps, I've seen, the worksheets that people have where you go in a practice room with your friend and mark all your pitch tendencies. And that is, for advanced players, fantastic. For inexperienced players, I think that's extremely overwhelming, and it kind of like plays some head games with them at times when I just want them to match their neighbor. Is really, we talk 90% of the time, match your neighbor. You have to sound like one flute. You have to sound like one clarinet. But if you teach them the absolute worst common notes on their instrument, like one or two notes, like all my trumpets know, low D's sharp, high D's flat, and what to do with when we get there. Like they put a little arrow on those or a kick. A couple of those things they can handle remembering very young, and then just expand out from there is really helpful for them. That's been my experience. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Raise your standard. If you hear poor tuning, do not allow it. Stop, identify it. Oh, you know what? Let's listen to that. Okay, you guys hear that? That's sharp. That's what sharp is. Then help them adjust it. Help the kids. Have the class help hear it. Don't tell a kid, listen, tune. Those words are empty. They mean nothing to kids.
Yeah, and the word in tune and in tone are often used. I mean, the tone is not as good as well. So when you fix the pitch, the tone will be improved. Yeah,
100%. 100. Again, we use the concert F relay going down the line, and we see if kids can, like, I'll have the tuner and I'll have like my, the one with the smiley face, my TE tonal energy tuner, and we'll go down the line and like, have them play. And they'll say, that seems sharp. That seems flat. And then I'll show them like what it is. And they like that game. And then and it doesn't make it scary. So if they're wrong, then they kind of know, oh, I heard that wrong. It's okay. We're learning it. Also in context, then you got to take the tuning and then train your kids to freeze when you want them to freeze. So we're super strict about our kids being very disciplined on, if I ask you to play one measure, I literally mean one measure, because we're working something out there. I do not trail on. They know to freeze. And this is important because we'll be like, okay, let's play this. And when we get to that third beat, I need everyone to freeze so we can figure out what's going on with that note. And then you can identify that. You're teaching the kids that here's the context of why tuning matters. Look at, we get to that note. It's okay. Maybe it's a wrong note. We fix it. It still sounds bad. That's a tuning problem. Let's figure out why. And you can isolate those things. And it will matter then to kids that, oh, I'm playing that out of tune. And when they hear it in isolation and like stop and work on it, then they understand it's important.
Yeah, they buy in because it's on their concert music and they see the tangible fix when they can actually fix it.
100%.
Yeah.
Top 10 trouble spots. I think I saw some of these probably in a Band World magazine years ago or something, and I had always used this, but these are places where tuning problems, if you get everybody pretty stable, then you go from there. Inside your music, here's where you're going to hear your problems. If, imitating past octaves are screaming, listen to me, I'm out of tune. So you have to figure that. Long tones, like we talked about, if they don't do a good release, that bad boy's going flat, or depending on the instrument, it might go sharp, but right before a rest, they tend to let down. Ends of phrases, unisons have to match. They have to match. There's just the human soul like shudders when those things are clashing. I want my kids to get to the point where things like unisons or octaves or extreme registers, where they hear that bad sound, I want them to have like a physical like gag out almost. And because I get it, so I tell them, if you can feel it like in your bones, like, oh, it turns your stomach a little bit when you hear that sound, that's bad. Or it sounds sour to you, there you go. That's a bad tuning spot. But if you look through your score and when you're prepping, you identify some of these things, particularly if it's, something that, includes a bad note on an instrument, a bad tuning tendency, you can like circumvent that and fix it before it becomes an issue and get your kids fixed to hearing it the right way. Okay, here we go. Record. It's awful. It's horrible. It's painful. It's time consuming. You're like, I don't have time. I just need to rehearse this. We still have to fix the dotted eighth rhythm or whatever. You have to record yourself and immediately play it back to your kids. And it just the delight I get from watching their faces. I mean, oh, they look at you like, oh, it's so good. And you don't even have to say anything. The next time you go to play it, it's going to be better because they're cognizant of, this is not as good as I thought. I better pay attention to what I'm doing. And we just in class, nothing fancy. I do like voice memo on my phone. I put it up on the board, start, go, email it to myself. And then we play it back right through the computer speakers that are set up like 2 seconds later. So the old days of like, I remember taping my band with a tape recorder because I'm elderly. So we would take it and then I'd play it back to them, or we'd like, actually have to record and stuff. But now you can instantly play it back for your kids and you will fix 1,000 things that you can't get to in rehearsal, but the kids can fix themselves just by listening to it. Talk about like convincing kids that they need to do a 4 or 8 bar phrase. Play a recording to them where they're breathing every 2 measures and then say, do you hear the phrases? And instantly they do not want to sound like that. Yep. All right, here we go. Okay, so once you have good individual sound, balance and blend, it has to happen before even style or anything else. So match individuals, critical. We, like I said, we do a lot of down the line. So the kids are hearing. And so I'm guiding them, but not dictating everything that happens. They need to start making those decisions themselves pretty early on. Again, that individual, like go down the row, hear the tone, hear the differences, make them match. The overlapping one where somebody plays for 5 counts and you want to try to make it so you don't hear a break between them.
Yep.
That's a good little trick to do.
There's another one I've seen somebody do where they hold the concert F for 4 and then the concert B flat for 4. And when they move to the concert B flat, the next person comes in on the F So there's literally a fifth happening at all the time. And shout out to Dean Neal from Nokomis High School. That one I heard, and it was a way to do tuning, but also the down the lines and all that.
I just wrote that down. I'm stealing that. I live and die by the trio. I talk to them constantly.
Yep.
Check your trio. And then we will actually stop class and demonstrate, like, you three. And then I shift over one person. You three, shift over. And I'll coach them, and we'll say, okay, now listen to this trio, guys. You know, Blake is playing a little softer than these two. I don't know if you can tell that. Blake's stronger, you less. Now that trio's matched. Can you guys hear? And we talk about it. Then the next three, then the next three. But we are on their cases constantly about tone, volume, style. They have to match all those things.
And when you
kids
do
understand it pretty
and
fast.
even if you just say listen in your trios and then play the chord again, it's instantly more balanced and blend because they're thinking about it.
100%.
Yeah.
We do section to section balancing, rotate which section the group balances to and plays under. For instance, we'll play through a section and I'll be like, this time I want everyone to be able to hear the flutes. So back off to the point that you can hear the flutes. And okay, we talk about how's that sound? What does that sound like? This time I want everyone to back off so that you can hear the first clarinets. And it just gives them, it changes the color, it changes the texture, everything changes, and it creates some flexibility so that they're mentally not locked into, I'm the melody, or I'm, if they even know that. So it's kind of fun to like decide, and I'll ask a kid who wants to be the important group. Tenor saxes. Okay, everybody's soft. Like anybody would have to play softer to hear the tenor saxes, but
right.
Everyone back down and whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and it's applicable to band music because if you can't hear the melody, then here we're talking about layering here, so that's where it's from.
Right, and when your band music gets more interesting, say you have a counter melody, second time through, we need to balance to that counter melody. That they're ready to do that. I talk to the kids about priorities though, and they need to know which of these they are and how they're going to prioritize that. So melody always has to be number one. I tell them bass line is number two because that's defining where we're coming and going from. And then counter melody, and that's a little bit flexible depending on like it's the second time through or a strain or like,
sure.
We've heard the melody. That can like interchange with the melodic. And then harmony, I always tell them, I love you, but you are a distant second, third, fourth, back of the room. So if you're the melody or counter melody, your job is to play as beautifully as possible. If you're everybody else, your job is to make them sound as beautiful as possible. And you can't do that if you're stepping on them and smushing and smothering them. So the melody has to dominate. Here's some tricks that work for balancing things. And this is one where people would want to look it up of like who should be listening to who to balance things. I don't know if I have a slide for it, but in general, when I'm playing full sections, if it's not something that's aggressive, I really like to be able to make sure I can hear my second and third clarinets and my euphoniums. And if I can hear those things, it's usually a really beautiful sound. If those things are buried, it's usually the band's muddy and I can't hear things.
Yeah.
Oh, here goes. Euphonium. Okay, so euph and tuba, do not let them overblow because their sound will get distorted. And it's just like cranking a bass. My battery percussion, they know they have to be inside that ensemble sound, but like my triangle, tambourine, all those effects that you hold up, they have to like float above the band sound. And then I always let like the timpani, bass drum, and tubas, they have to be matching. They have to be a team. And when I have my percussion with my woodwinds, then the bass drum and timpani has to match my bari sax and bassoon, generally.
Yeah, you have another one of specific trips that you didn't mention that I want to mention here if we go back one. Flute balance to clarinet when the flute is above the clarinet in an octave. Flute balances to trumpet when they're in unison. Clarinet balances to flute when they're in the same octave. Alto sax balances to horn when in unison, and then low woodwinds balance to the low brass on matching lines.
Yeah. I mean, all those things will work if you try them and tell your kids, and you'll like the sound of your band.
Yeah.
It'll sound right to you. Let's talk about alignment just a minute. Please use a metronome. I'm begging you. The world needs more metronome because as humans, we are not great at keeping time. All right, specifically kids. So I feel like when I started using a metronome more, which I did early on, my conducting got a lot better because I wasn't adding real weird stuff to it. I was right there. But there is no shame in using a metronome. And And I know there is some feedback like, well, I don't want the kids to get reliant on it. Just today, I was talking to the kids about that, saying, I'm going to put the metronome on, I'll pull it off, I'll bring it back in as we play to check. And one of the kids said, oh, we're staying with it. It's ingrained in our brain. And I said, yes, just like one of those brain eating amoebas that, whatever. And they're laughing. I said, but that's how, when we want a particular tempo, they should like know in their soul, like where that is and be, have an awareness of that. So we use a lot of metronome. Here's a trick I use with our beginners. And even with my older kids, if they're getting sloppy, instead of doing a foot tap, we do a full motion arm tap, like a karate chop, 1 and 2 and 3 and that lets me see who can and cannot keep a pulse, and you'd be surprised who can't. And also that large muscle use develops more myelin in the brain, it develops more connections, and they're going to like lock in what a downbeat and upbeat is much more if there's a larger muscle group and there's more physicality involved with it. That's why like your kids who are good marchers also have good time, because their feet are, their whole body's moving in time, kind of thing.
Right. Interesting.
When I want alignment with technical passages, we literally slow it down to at least half speed, and I will rehearse measure by measure. We do a measure and they know to stop. We do it until it's perfectly clean. Then we do 2 measures. Then we do 1 and 2 together. Then we do measure 3, then 1 and 3, etc. But slow is the one to rule them all. You have to slow down and you have to chunk it, or it'll never be clean. It'll be close, but it's not horseshoes, so it'll still sound bad. Because when things are close, not only are you not aligned rhythmically, you're not aligned harmonically anymore. You're not aligned melodically.
I have a friend who calls it grandma tempo.
That's funny. Yep, grandma tempo. And I'm getting old enough now that I like to make old jokes at them. So I'll tell them this is all the faster I can conduct. So we'll slow it down. But they're used to it. And, their muscle memory increases the slower they go. And then it's amazing. Then you can, once you inch it up, you can start cranking. Yeah. We teach the kids to subdivide, that we break our rhythmic figures into the smallest unit. Mostly with grade 1, 2, and 3 music, it's a lot of 8th note breakdown. So we break everything down into smallest units, make sure they're matching, and then put it back together like a puzzle. But our kids do know, like, a dotted quarter note isn't just a beat and a half, it's 3 8th notes. Mm-hmm. And they know to answer that way, that they have to be thinking, well, and we actually teach them to pulse it at times or to tongue that. And I'll be like, all right, we're going to subdivide this. You're going to break it into everything into its 8th note part. So that helps a lot with understanding alignment for the kids. And then bopping is eternally useful, where they just play the attack of every note and no sustain. So if you have like entrances, teach them how to bop, and then instead of like hearing like something build, you can be like, well, I should hear beep bop beep bop bop if it's all correct. It also tells you if they're hitting the note accurately on their entrance. Sometimes they're splat, 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 splat. And I'm like, well, then we've got some work to do on embouchure and those other things. It exposes a lot.
Bopping is great. It's funny, and it tells you everything. It's very revealing.
It can be painful when they're first learning how to do it. It's not fun to learn because it's pretty gross at first, but once they know how to do it, it works beautifully. Sizzle and finger, the old standard. If I isolate a line with another group, everybody else needs to sizzle and finger, unless I say, oh, take a break and think about how you're going to post for Instagram or whatever today. And they'll they have to be doing it. For alignment, do not overlook your releases. So many times the band will be playing well, and then the release is just like sort of this like thing. I teach a lot of releases to be like lifts. I say to the kids a lot when at the end, lift, and so that the note goes like out rather than a chop, unless it's something very aggressive. But talk to them about lifting to end the note. All right, and then here we go. Style is a whole nother clinic. But once you do these things, you can address style. But I see a lot of people put the cart before the horse, and they talk about style before anything else. Like more staccato, more this or whatever. Not style will never matter unless everything we talked about today is in place. And it just is, it'll be a feeble attempt and unsuccessful unless tone and matching and blend and pitch are in place. And then you can place style on top of that, because I read somewhere creativity comes from discipline. And I mean, it's never more true, I think, than in a wind group. We have to be disciplined in order to push into creative, like shaping phrases and interpretation and style. Those can't happen without the discipline of the rest of this.
All right. Finally, Rachel, thank you for being here and sharing all this wealth of information. Your contact screen on the screen is your contact email. Happy if people reach out to you.
Okay. Yeah. If you have any questions, please reach out. I'm happy to talk about band. It's my favorite.
And the people who are just listening, it's rajabmaxwell@gmail.com.
Yep.
Okay. So final question for you. Name of a piece or composer that you think people should listen to.
I'm a big fan of all of the heavy band works that have been, I think, really kind of transcribed or adapted to like grade 3. And I know that's a general statement, but don't be afraid to do those, because it provides your kids with the essence of the work, of works they might not ever have the chance to play. And then when they do play them, they'll love it, because they're like, oh, I played this already. And those pieces are handled in most cases with a lot of maturity and a lot of authentic musicality. So I'm a big fan of some of the grade 4 things that have been adapted to grade 3 that make them much more playable and much more attainable and realistic for a lot more groups. So I know that's not a specific piece, but I think people should not be shy about digging into that repertoire that's out there.
A seamless transition and a shameful plug. I think it was episode 121. I did a whole episode on Douglas Wagner's music and played about a dozen of his pieces of different levels. And you're right. It's amazing what he can do and what other arrangers, Michael Sweeney, Michael Story, and all these people can do with this great music at the younger band level. So thank you for mentioning
instance,
that.
there's a Sea Songs adaptation that's like a grade 3. I think it's better than the original because it's written in better balance and just, so look at those things. I don't think anybody's going to like look down on you for not doing the original, because we're not sitting around with ascots and pipes. So we're with kids and they should be exposed to the best music possible.
Rachel, thank you very much for spending the time with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.